And I will just call this a manager's view because sometimes it comes down to managing conflicts. It begins with James 4:1 in the New International Version. What causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? There were a number of what I would call pithy questions of the Apostle James that strike at the heart of conflict. And he asked them then to segue into the prayer life of a believer, and sometimes the erroneous prayer life. But beyond individual situations, these questions also probe into disunity, dysfunctional relationships, and counterproductivity in the church. If conflicts are not resolved in a church, the church sometimes goes on in all the motions and the mechanics of church services, etc., but it actually becomes counterproductive and things will start going backwards. Pastoring today is much more than pulpiteering. We have to see it as wisely managing spiritual resources. That means making informed, educated decisions that affect both the mission of the church and the ministers who are helping to accomplish that mission. So James' words ring true. Fights and quarrels do rage within us, and the church often suffers because of them. Successful churches find a way to diffuse these conflicts and somehow harness the energy that is wasted by negativism. The churches then march forward. Churches that plateau or decline, however, many times they are stalemated by circumstances, and see if you can relate to this, in which two or more ministries, that is, departments with leaders and workers and volunteers, they end up nullifying each other's efforts through contention and disharmony. Ultimately, leadership must emerge, but poor management practices often drag down good leaders. There's an old saying, and maybe you've heard this, management is doing things right, but leadership is doing right things. Have you heard that? Well, let me tell you something else. Doing right things can be sabotaged by not doing things right. Even when you say, well, we're doing the right thing here, if you're not doing it right, then doing the right thing becomes null and void. So sorting out all these issues that are involved may be a challenge, but we need to begin. The church is, oh yes sir.
I was just going to ask, like, management and leadership, are they separate or one is both?
Well, as I said, management is trying to be efficient and effective, cost-effective, not wasting resources and so forth. That's the manager's job. But the leader's job is to say, this is the direction we're going. This is what this church is all about. We're a revival church. We're a prayer church. We're a witnessing church. Whatever it is, the vision of that pastor casts for the church, that's leadership.
Okay.
So, and for the leader to succeed, he must have either himself good management skills or has to have people on board with him on his team that can help him to manage those things. So it's kind of like the helmsman or the captain of the ship says we're going this direction, and all the people in the hold or down below in the bowels of the ship, if you will, They're all the ones that make the engines go and make things happen and so forth.
Yeah.
They have no idea what direction you're going in, but whatever direction you say we're going in, we're going to do it the best way we possibly can. That's the difference between leadership and management. So the church is a multifaceted institution. It's commissioned to evangelize, disciple, organize, mature, nurture, train, equip, counsel, inspire, guide its constituents with staffing and with community. So that's a lot, but it was just simply to let you know all the different functions that a church has to be involved in. But maintaining life and effectiveness across this broad diversity of functions demands a lot of focus. It can be a daunting task. There has to be balance. There has to be good quality leadership. And when we service one or two ministries at the expense of other ministries, then things become dicey. They become perhaps toxic and debilitating. Sometimes they will kill the church. Servicing all the facets of the operation at adequate levels, however, provides for sustained and stable existence. The key seems to be superior leadership as modeled in the apostolic era. And if leadership is lacking, then each function, each of these departments and what they're doing defaults into self-serving locus of activity. In other words, it's like the 5 wise and 5 foolish virgins. The 5 foolish virgins ran out of oil, and they asked the 5 wise to give them oil. The 5 wise said, you know, we've got enough for ourselves. You know, we're too bad. It's too bad what happened to you. But so what happens is when things get rough, people tend to turn inward. They tend to pull in and say, I'm going to make sure that I survive. I'm really sad about you, but I know I've got to make sure that my ministry keeps going. If leadership is lacking, then each function will default into a self-serving locus of activity which contradicts and degrades other functions. The human body requires interaction with and interdependence of all the vital organic systems. So also the church cannot survive by just simply a single point of emphasis. In your body, if you do not get some kind of exercise, then your muscles will atrophy. And even though you may eat well and so forth, that's what you focus on, you're not going to be healthy because you neglected the exercise. Yes, ma'am?
Yeah, for church leaders or pastors, there is this things in leadership and management. Okay, for management you can find people around you who will help you, but what if you're a pastor and you're lacking in leadership qualities?
Well, that's what continuing education courses like this are all about. So, yes, and many of us, you probably have the overall skills or you wouldn't be in the position you're in, but there may be some areas in which you're lacking or you need improvement. And so, yes, it is important for us either to acquire those abilities through education, through conferencing, through counsel and advice from other people who are doing the work effectively, or to bring people on board with you, to get people on your team that are good at some of these things. And so it's always a challenge. I will guarantee you that. But we also always have to improve. The concept of these interactive systems is also taught to us, is advanced in the scriptures, but we have to, sometimes we have to extrapolate from the parables and the metaphors that are used. Jesus spoke of what? He spoke of the vine, of a great house, of a great tree, a flock of sheep, a city, a family. So why was he speaking about, why didn't he just say management? So no, that's not the way he operated, and we're probably not going to find direct answers in that sense in the scripture, but we are going to find these metaphors, these parables that are loaded with principles, leadership principles, management principles that we have to extract or extrapolate from them. Probably the most exhaustive treatment of the concept is the passage in 1 Corinthians 12, 14 through 17. Not going to read that, but I'll just tell you because you're familiar with this. The Apostle Paul refers to the church as a human body with its diverse parts and organs which function independently, but all work together for the welfare of the individual. So, can the ear say to the eye, I have no need of you? Can the hand say to the foot, I don't need you? And it doesn't. The hand can survive perfectly well if both my feet were cut off. But I need my feet in order to go to the places so where my hand can be effective. And so in this same sense, you need all of these different areas of the church operating in a balanced and functional way for the church as a whole to make progress. So all of these images consist of the interaction of systems working together to produce the richness and purposeful progression of the kingdom of God. So, the Apostle Paul then makes an insightful comparison of the church to a building. Ephesians 2, 21 and 22. I'll read this for you from the NIV. In him, the whole building is joined together and rises to become a holy temple in the Lord. And in him, you too are being built together to become a dwelling in which God lives by his Spirit. So if we analyze what Paul is saying here in this metaphor, it is the discerning architect who designs a building, and then a competent contractor who oversees the construction of the building that really produces the end result. And so that contractor has what he calls subcontractors, does he not? Mm-hmm. And that those subcontractors must work within the limitations that are established by the general contractor. They have to set their priorities in the order in which jobs to do, the amount of time spent on each task, and the cost of each component. We cannot leave the foundation half finished just because the roof needs attention. We cannot slight the exterior treatment of the walls because the interior trim absorbed too much labor. So every element of the construction of the building needs proper attention if it's going to have integrity and durability. So let's apply this. When the time comes for the full implementation of principles, turmoil is always one decision away. When you decide what you're going to do, then that says, okay, if we're going to do that, then this is what we got to do first, this is what we got to do second. And as soon as you make that decision, this is what we're going to do first, there might be somebody that will get offended and misunderstand and say, I don't think that's what we should do first. I agree with the direction we need to go, but what we need to do is this. So, there are what we call primary players in each one of these sub-operations of the church. And these players, if you forgive the term, see things from their perspective only. And they're not aware, or maybe they're unconcerned, about the welfare of other operations. No one can be faulted for wanting the best for his or her area of ministry. There are certain parameters that have to be imposed on these departmental leaders or unit leaders so that the success of one function does not cause the failure of another function. So these constraints might take the form of budget. You gave him a budget of $1,000 and you only gave me a budget of $200. It's not fair. Or programming. Why does that department get to make announcements on Sunday morning when everybody's there? And I have to make mine on Wednesday night when nobody's there. No, speaking broadly. Recruiting. Some people, it's easy to recruit somebody to go out with the youth department for a big bonfire. And we're going to roast marshmallows and we're going to, you know, who wants to help? Oh yeah, we'll all help. Who wants to drive the van on Sunday morning to go pick up people? Nobody? It's hard to recruit for some things. Why does one department get a great big room and another department gets a closet? Why do they get all of this equipment, the latest of equipment, and I have to do with broken down hand-me-downs that somebody else can't use anymore? On and on it goes. And then there might be an emotional aspect, each leader vying for his or her desired goal. If the leader fails to resolve these conflicts, that is, if the pastor fails to resolve these conflicts, they will paralyze the general operation. So, how do these things get started? What's the origin of some of these conflicts? Sometimes it comes down to the people. Let me ask you this: how are recruitment and training situations handled in your church? You say, well, what do you mean? Well, a lot of people evolve in their positions by default rather than by purposeful selection.
Right.
You know, how did I end up in this ministry? Well, you were the only one available.
Yes.
Or how did that guy get in charge of that department? And he doesn't, God bless him, he doesn't know what he's doing. Well, he had seniority because everybody else kind of evolved out of the department. He was the only one left, and he was there longer than anybody else. And so he got the job. Or that lady was a close friend or a relative of the person who was in charge at the time, and they moved them into a leadership position. Sometimes people are put in charge of a ministry because the pastor is trying to help them out. I think it'd be good if I just give you something to do. Or you'd feel better about yourself. It'd help your self-esteem if you just get involved in here.
That's reading my diary.
Well, I will tell you this, none of these are good reasons to serve this man.
Can you just say over them again?
You want me to go back over these again?
These are all
Just
new
quickly.
to us.
Yeah.
I understand that this is on YouTube, so you can go back and get it. But I will tell you this, only those who are capable and have a definite calling to the ministry should be promoted to leadership. You say, well, what if there is no one else to do the job? I understand that. That's why you have what you call term limits. Put someone in a position for a definite limited term, a year, maybe 2 years, and then let them know at the end of this term you will no longer be in this position. Now, I may reappoint you, but do not expect that. We may shift you into some other position. That is a way you can at least cut your losses and not be saddled with someone who says, for example, the piano. They used to have what we call piano players. Now it's keyboard artists. But a person that was their place. I mean, for 55 years, Sister Jones, that's the organ, that was her place. And woe be unto the person that tried to get her off of that organ bench. Even though she didn't know how to play, I can only imagine. So the decision is where the pastor's role has to give way to the manager's approach. And you can find a lot of excellent resources for recruiting volunteer workers all over the web. The primary task for the overseer is to lead those who minister under his authority. So let's identify the types of unit leaders and understand what must be done to help them contribute to the overall success of the church. I like to categorize them this way: the overeager, the underperformer, the maverick, the whiner, and the bulldog. You can manage all of them. We're going to look at them individually. You can manage all of these using different tactics and different tools. But the manager has to calculate the effort and time needed for each type and determine whether or not it's worth it. Sometimes it makes more sense to find somebody else or find a better, more suitable place for someone to serve. When each unit functions at its optimum level, the benefit redounds to the whole church. So let's look at each of these types and discuss the pros and cons of each one. The overeager. The overeager person. This person is a veritable manufacturing plant of ideas. He or she sees 59 ways to do something better, or do something or to do it better. Overeagers seriously believe that they're trying to help. They're energetic, sometimes impulsive, and they believe that nothing is impossible to improve the quality and the reach of their department. The problem with the overeager is that they can irritate others because they never sit down and shut up. Or that many of their ideas seem unrealistic. They probably will never change their basic behavior, but the leader needs to sit down with them and school them in a dose of reality. Once they're taken through all the steps necessary to implement a single idea, then they can begin to understand all the ramifications of their many ideas. I've always believed that there'd be a whole lot less suggesting going on if each suggester was responsible for his own suggestion. I don't know, there are people that would hand me a laundry list of things that I should do at the end of the Sunday morning service. And then they would shake my hand, God bless you, Pastor, and walk out the door. And leave expecting me to do all the things that they thought would be good for me to do as a pastor. Well, any one of those ideas would have been more than I could handle, along with all the other jobs I had. So, the overeager, they're wonderful, they're exciting, but they need to have some kind of understanding that this thing you're suggesting, there's a whole lot more to it than just this simple little implementation. It's going to cost money, it's going to take personnel, it's going to take time, etc. Secondly, there's the underperformer. The underperformer falls into the opposite category of the overeager. The underperformer has loads of ability and potential, but due to lack of motivation, outside distractions, fear of failure, or just plain old laziness, they never live up to their potential. So unless underperformers get motivated, they'll probably resist anyone who tries to push them to do more. Sometimes they say they'll work on a project, but often they bail out or they don't show up. They usually have good excuses, but it's a sad situation and a waste of ability. But perhaps maybe the best use of the underperformer is to ask them to analyze the ideas of others and get their opinion. One thing they can do better than most is to think. So they may have to just be kind of the person you bounce ideas off of, and not somebody that you entrust to them a project or an idea. Just the other day, a pastor's wife was lamenting to myself and my wife, we were eating dinner together, about someone in their praise team who was a good keyboard person. Well, the pastor said, you know, last Wednesday night, we didn't have any music. We had to sing a cappella. And the pastor's wife spoke up and said, we've got we got two ladies who could have done this, but one was sick. And the other one said many times, yeah, I'll do it, but never shows up. Maybe every third or fourth time that she says she'll do it, she'll show up. Well, what happens? You can't count on that. Eventually you don't ask that person. And guess what? That person then sometimes gets a little bit peeved that they never get asked. You never ask me. Oh, yes, we do. But you always bail out on us. So those are some problems, and it is very typical of the underperformer. Then there is the maverick. The maverick. Mavericks are rule breakers. They don't necessarily cheat, but they will find a way to get something done that bends or breaks the conventional way of operating. Much of the time they see rules as silly obstacles or unnecessary hoops to jump through, and they'll just ignore them. Oh, that's just a bunch of paperwork. Oh, we don't really have to do that. Mavericks will use relationships to their advantage. They'll spend unauthorized money. They'll go around or over the head of the person in charge, or they will subtly oppose leadership. A lot of times mavericks have these charming personalities or other kind of redeeming qualities that just makes it difficult to call their hand. You know, I know they shouldn't do that, but they're so nice, and everybody likes them. They're just like fun to be around. Well, it's often difficult to assess the mavericks' motives. You never know if they're being insubordinate or just trying to get something done that truly has merit and needs to be done. So most of the time, you just shrug your shoulders and look the other way with Mavericks. Unless they do something totally unethical or they cause dissension in the ranks. If somebody continually breaks the rules, you do have to do something about it. And at some point, the maverick is not stupid, so at some point the maverick will either comply or find some other department, something else to do, or not do anything altogether. What you have to be careful about is the maverick who is constantly opposed or hindered, that they will develop a bad spirit and feel like no one really appreciates what they're doing. And in that case, they often cause problems. What I have found is that a maverick usually marginalizes himself or herself. They just move the periphery of the church activities, and they'll show up, they'll pay their tithes and offerings, but that's about it. And so a maverick is somebody, a capable person that you have to pray about. Number 4 is the whiner. The whiner. The whiner may be capable of doing good things, but they're hard to put up with. Their critical, implacable spirit can be disheartening to the ministry because they have a complaint about everything. Whiners rarely smile and often have a chip on their shoulder. When you see a whiner heading your direction, you usually want to run and hide. Whiners think that either too much is asked of them or not enough is asked of them. They often complain that other people aren't doing their jobs right. Whiners, now listen to this, whiners are not usually bold enough to confront situations on their own, but they will continually come to you to get you to talk to somebody and correct some perceived wrong. Whiners do need to be listened to from time to time because occasionally they have something legitimate to say. But after a while, you should sympathize with them at the moment and then go on and do what you were going to do anyway. Don't allow the whiner to be a negative drain on your spirit or on the morale of the ministry group. Usually I have found that the whiner, the complainer, when they are not taken up on their complaint, a week later they'll forget about it. Because the point was never to get that particular thing done. It was a way of making themselves feel significant and that they were to be a force to be reckoned with. And so if it's not earth-shaking, it's not a nuclear bomb about to go off, then just kind of patronize them, placate them, and go on about your business. Finally, there is what we call the bulldog. The bulldog is typically self-centered, aggressive, a person that wants his or her own way. Bulldogs disparage any attempt to stop them or keep them from getting what they want. Bulldogs bully, hence the word bulldog. Intimidate,